To be here. As John said, I'm the new leader of the council, and prior to being elected, I was the cabinet member for regeneration for 4 years. So I'm very familiar, not just with this scheme, but with the issues that we face as a borough in terms of regeneration. So what I want to just do is kind of run through a bit of a timescale of Spray Street, and particularly kind of set the context of how we are where we are. Talk about some of the issues that we're facing, and then kind of finish with some final comments, I think, about what this means for us. So I think the first thing to say is that actually the kind of genesis of Spray Street and developments for proposals goes right the way back to 2005, when the council cabinet actually agreed a report to the principle of redevelopment on the covered market site. So I think that's a really important marker of kind of where Woolwich was then, ideas about regeneration and change, and also kind of thinking back to what Woolwich would have looked like then, and it would have been an entirely different set of issues that people were facing. And it wasn't actually until 2014 that the cabinet agreed the proposals for the development of Woolwich Town Centre as set out in its Woolwich Town Centre master plan. Subsequent to that, in 2015, there was a specific master plan developed for the Spray Street area. And I think that was done because it was quite clear to everyone involved that the redevelopment of that area was not going to happen on its own if it was just left to kind of market forces. I mean, it's actually a sizable area in many respects, but a small area in many others. And in Spray Street itself, there are more than 50 different land ownerships. And clearly that makes any redevelopment incredibly complex. I think it's important to point out that at that point the council did agree to provide a compulsory purchase order indemnity agreement. So effectively the council was saying we don't really want to get into CPO, that should be a last resort, and clearly the kind of process of negotiation with individual businesses and tenants would take precedence over that. In December 2015, the council chose the development partner who it was going to work with, which was St Modwyn and Notting Hill, and actually it then took 6 months to enter into a formal agreement with them, which didn't happen until May of 2016. So I think I'm just trying to do this to kind of give a sense of the different parts of this process, which is incredibly complex and predates kind of many of us in the room. So once that development agreement was signed in 2016, then the kind of plan, the development of the planning application was effectively underway. And since then, both organisations have been out talking to people, engaging, and coming up with the work that they need to do on their planning application, which was eventually submitted at the end of last year. Now, obviously, people have seen that, people have had the plans, and people have had a response to those proposals. Now, as well as the numbers that John gave, I mean, clearly they have done a lot of engagement both in and around the Woolwich area, talking to people, talking to businesses, and actually over 300 people have now formally responded to the planning application. I think it's clear that from the planning application there's a number of issues that people have raised that the council is now responding to and engaging with the developer on. So I guess in no particular order, the issues around the heritage buildings on the site and the proposals to demolish those. People have raised issues about the scale and density of the development. People have raised issues about the level of affordable housing, and although in kind of numbers terms it is policy compliant at 35%, the split is not as outlined in the core strategy. Clearly, at the time of submitting the application, the listing of the market was not on the agenda in the way that it is now, and that's a matter for Heritage England, completely outside of the council's control, and they will need to respond to that. And all of those issues have meant that the council is now in discussions with the applicant about addressing those prior to any decision being taken by the council's planning board. In March this year, some particular concerns were raised, which I was very keen to address, that the kind of somehow the Spray Street development was all about clearing out BME organisations from Woolwich. Now, I absolutely refute that. It's completely untrue, and to that extent, I made sure that we were out engaging and talking to people. We had a meeting in Artfix where we invited all of the businesses down, and I think about 23 businesses attended overall. And, you know, I mean, whatever views you want to have on the development, I just assure you that, you know, clearly the council is about, you know, a Woolwich that works for everyone, and would never be involved in targeting any particular community. That meeting was attended by councillors, including the ward councillors and myself, and I think actually what was interesting was some people said to me they're really concerned and want to know more information, and other people said, how much money do I get to leave? So there is a total kind of, you know, difference of opinion and different views within the context of business owners in Spray Street themselves. I also want to point out that alongside the planning process, which is kind of the formal route to taking a decision, some other work is happening. So the council is now in the process of developing a new equalities impact assessment, which would specifically address understanding the impact of any use of CPO powers on organisations and protected groups within the Spray Street area. We're doing some work to check the land ownerships with the land registry, because we obviously need to make that a very important part of the process. And two organisations have been appointed as part of this process to do some negotiations with businesses, and that's GL Hearn, and they've been reaching out to organisations. There's another organisation called Tree Shepherd, and their work is really about understanding what businesses may need in order to relocate from the area, and having the conversations about their own individual needs and what the council needs to be aware of, and the developer needs to be aware of in that process. And there's now going to be a lot more direct engagement, so they've hired some space in Woolwich Town Centre that people will be able to drop in on a weekly basis, and that is all going to be publicised. So I guess just to finish, I mean, I think that is worth addressing, I guess, the kind of why we're here. And I think what you can see from the room and some of the concerns is that there's, you know, a big debate going on about what is regeneration, not just in Greenwich, but in London, fundamentally. And actually, I think if you were to go right back to 2005, when, you know, and you'd have asked someone for a definition of what regeneration was, they would have talked about, you know, housing, schools, education, new spaces, new public realm. But since then, the housing crisis has become so intensified that almost every single regeneration development now in London is seen exclusively through the prism of housing and the stress that we all know exists in that system. And I think, you know, that's why schemes and, you know, big schemes like this are receiving more attention from the public. There have also been changes which I think are beyond our control. So I think in 2005, would any of us have really understood the impact that Crossrail would have had on the borough and will have on the borough? Probably not. And, you know, I mean, I think we've seen significant changes in and around the Woolwich area as a result of that. One of the big issues for the council to consider is in that kind of changing context of redevelopment, what alternative spaces are available for small businesses in Woolwich, and how do people, you know, kind of make sure that they can stay inside the town? What is the offer that we provide in the town? Because clearly none of us are interested in just creating a dormitory town where people live to get on the train and go to work elsewhere. I think it's obviously very, very difficult whenever you're managing change, and the kind of changes that we're having to manage here are huge, and you've got different expectations from different people. And I think it's really, you know, I mean, it's clearly a fact that with the kind of changes, not just in Greenwich, but in this part of London as a whole, change is happening. So how do we make sure that it's the kind of change that we want to see, and it's the best possible change for the whole community? And I think, you know, finally, just to say that whatever people's views, the council has always been expressly clear that we're never doing these things at the expense of local people. Now, unfortunately, we do have to take difficult decisions. You know, we don't have all the money that we need to do things, and the planning process can be an incredibly frustrating to be for you and for us. But fundamentally, for us, regeneration is about creating the best possible opportunities for the people that live here and the people that want to come and live here. And I hope that people see that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abby. Thank you very much.